Hi everyone, it's Tammy with Shabby Fabrics. I have the most elegant quilt to show you today. This is the Lattice Bouquet quilt. I just love how elegant this is. The black, the white, the gray, they're just gorgeous together. This quilt looks much more complicated than it really is. And I'm going to show you easy piecing techniques. Make this quilt go together just quickly as this one did when I made it. So we have in your kit, we do have kits available. I have the Lattice Bouquet pattern will be included. We also have a limited number of backings still available. This is Steelworks by Marcus. I'm going to set that aside. All right, so let me show you how easy this is to make. So this quilt is made up of two blocks. You have a star block and then you have a bouquet block. Beautiful. And when you put them all together, because we've snowballed the corners on this, it makes it look much more intricate, the way the blocks just kind of all are pieced together with the chain in between. I love quilts that look like that. Okay, so let's get started and let me show you. Let's start with this block right here. So I'm going to start with the pinwheel and the half square triangles. Half square triangles can sometimes be a problem, and I know that. So the easiest way that I have found to do half square triangles is using star singles. I love star singles. You know, my half square triangles come out perfect every single time I use them. They're so easy to use. So a 2.5 inch star single is not, you use a 2.5 inch square, but they are, that is a finished size of a star single. It is a 2.5 inch finished size half square triangle. All right, so they're going to be 3 by 3, 2.5 inch finished, 3 inches unfinished. All right, so we have 2 squares right here, right sides together, and I just pin in the 4 corners right here. I don't pin the heck out of this. I don't find any need to. You'll notice on a star single how they have numbers. So we're going to start with number 1, and we're going to sew on the dotted line, following the direction of the arrows till we get to a black dot, and we're going to drop our needle right there, pivot. Now we're sewing number 2, stop, pivot, number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And you just sew all the way off and you just chain stitch right onto your next star single. So you can just sew all of these fairly quickly. All right, so let me show you what that looks like when we get it sewn. I'll turn it over on the back so you can see what we're looking at here. Let's get the pins out and I'm going to show you how to square this up. All right, so one thing I should mention is I do reduce my stitch length on this. Normally we run about a 2.35 on the BERNINA to a 2.5 for a normal stitch length. We reduce this all the way down to 1.75. That's because you're sewing on paper. So I want that needle to perforate that paper more. It makes it much easier to take that paper off in the end. All right, so I'm going to use a Creative Grid spinning mat. This is the rotating mat by Creative Grids. I love this mat. It's extremely stable. When I apply pressure to it, it's not moving at all, which I love. I'm going to use a Creative Grids 2.5 by 12.5 inch ruler. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up on the outside edge, and I'm just simply going to take that off. I'm going to spin my mat, and just all the way around, we're going to keep doing this. Very easy. Nothing crazy yet, right? There we go. All right. Now, I'm just going to cut this in half, 2 ways. First way is like this. Spin your mat. And now cut it one more time. Just like that. I have 4 squares now. Okay, the last place I'm going to cut, now I'm going to cut these apart. I'm going to do this a couple of times because I need at least 4 to make a pinwheel. I'm doing the pinwheel in the center of this block right here. All right, let's see what we got. Set these aside. So now I have a half square triangle. So I need to get the paper off. So I'm going to crease it with my finger back on itself like this. I'm going to hold with my thumbnail right here at that top corner and simply tear this off. This piece will instantly release, just like that. Let's do it again. Beautiful. See how quick that comes off of there? This is a great job for a husband, by the way, or an elder child. I have taken children and taught them how to do this. My grandkids were taking paper off of star singles. They can't really hurt them. If they do and they pull a couple stitches out, I just quickly will restitch them. But if I hold my thumbnail at this top corner, I don't pull my stitches out near as often as I would if I was holding it somewhere else. Also, the smaller stitches do help. All right, so let's press this. So I have the Panasonic iron today. This is the 360 cordless iron. I want to press to the black, so I have that facing up. Set your seam, open, and press. I am using a wool pressing mat, and this really helps set my seams and makes my creases sharper when I'm pressing. If you've never used a wool pressing mat, I encourage you to try one. You will be surprised. All right, I have 4 half square triangles. Okay. Now I have a little corners here that I'm just going to trim these straight off. If you want to use a rotary cutter, you're welcome to do that. I usually just take a little pair of scissors and just snip. It just seems faster to me just to snip them off. These are the Karen Kate Buckley scissors. You can see how quick this is. These are nice little scissors. They have a serrated blade and it makes cutting very easy. They're very sharp. All right, we have a pinwheel now. We can make a pinwheel. So let's lay these out. Just like this. Correct? I like it. So I'm going to fold this one over and I'm going to nest these 2 seams in this bottom corner. Just going to kind of work it with my thumb just to make sure that those seams are really butted up against each other. They're really nested well. I'm going to take a pin. These are the Clover extra fine patchwork pins. And I'm just going to set it in that seam allowance just like that. Now you notice I did not pin all the way into that corner. I did that for a reason. I can start at the top of this and sew all the way down without removing the pin. And I like doing that. Let's do it again. Let's do the bottom one. Just like this. This one I'm going to start here and sew to the bottom. All right, let's go do that. All right, so let's take our pins out. I'm going to double check I did sew that correctly. This one goes like this. This one goes like that. How many times have you got to the machine and gone, am I sewing this side or am I sewing this side? I do it too. I double check before I press this. All right, so now I'm going to press this open. This little Panasonic iron is really handy for that. It's got a nice tip on it that just parts that seam perfectly. Look at that. That looks great. Press this one open, just like that. You can see this perfect little triangle right here. I'm going to sew exactly at the bottom of this is my 1/4 inch. I like that visual when I'm sewing my seams together. That it really helps to have a visual. All right, so let's put this together. So the first thing I'm going to do, let me clip my little threads so that you can see what I'm talking about. I got little threads there. So I'm going to part this seam just a little bit just to make sure that I have these stacked perfectly on top of each other. All right, and I'm going to take a pin. I'm going to put it right here. Okay. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this seam and this seam are nested together. Yep, they feel pretty good to me. I'm going to take another pin and run right along that seam allowance, just like that. Now that's going to hang on to those. Let's nest these two together, just like that. All right. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put another pin at the end of this seam allowance, because I already know when you start sewing here and you're all the way down, by the time I get to this point, those two edges are already trying to walk away from each other. I don't want them to do that. I want them to stay together. So I'm just going to put a pin there to remind them. But I did do that well out of my seam allowance, so I can just sew this whole thing straight across and not run into a pin. Let's go do that. All right, so we have our seam. I'm going to take my pins out. Let's take a look at how we did. Wow, that's perfect. I love that. All right, so let's press the seam open as well. I'm going to set that seam just to warm it up a little bit. Open the center and then run the iron straight down there, just like that. And give that a little bit of steam. I just want that to settle in and just be really flat. That looks great. Give it a little more steam from the front. Wow, that looks amazing. Okay, so that is how you're going to make a pinwheel with star singles. Now let's say you don't have star singles. I have you there. I'm going to take 2 pieces of fabric. These are the squares that we already cut, right? Because if you're following the cutting instructions, you're going to cut a large square like this. Now if you don't have star singles, here's how you do that. We're going to cut this in half. Okay, so I need to make sure I'm cutting this in half because this is 7 1/2, so that's going to be 3 3/4. 1, 2, 3 3/4. Let's make sure I do this in half. There we go. In half, spin it, and do it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. I know that's where my 3/4 goes. Just like that. Okay, these are very much oversized, and that's fine. That's great. Now I'm going to use a Creative Grids seam guide. I like this little tool. So when you're going to draw a line on the back, you can draw a line straight down the center and then sew 1/4 inch on either side. Sometimes that's difficult to do because you don't know where a 1/4 inch really is. Is my foot truly a perfect 1/4 inch? Am I running my foot exactly where it's supposed to be? That's kind of tricky sometimes, and I know that. So this Creative Grids seam guide takes all that stress away, and now all I have to do is sew on the line. Isn't that easy? I like sewing on a line. So I line this up so that the groove, the points, are right here in the groove. I'm going to move that rotary cutter. I already know what's going to happen. I'm going to spin my mat, draw on the other side of this. Ah, look at that. Now all I have to do is sew on the lines, cut down the center corner to corner, and I have 2 half-square triangles. Let's go do that. I'm going to put a little pin in this on either side just to hang on to it because I don't want these edges coming apart. All right? Here we go. All right, so we've sewn down both sides. I'm going to cut this in half, corner to corner, just like that. Let's press this. Now this one I'm going to press to the dark gray because I actually picked up this square So we're actually going to press to the dark gray on this one. That direction is in your pattern. This pattern is also available as a PDF download, so that if you want to just grab this pattern and get started right away, you can do that really quick. You don't have to wait for the mail to get to you. All right, so now I have half square triangles. Perfect, except I already know these are way too big. Let's see what these measure, because these should measure 3 by 3, but because we started with oversized squares, they're going to be bigger, which is a good thing, because trimming them down makes them perfect. Another good word I love, in piecing especially. All right, so I'm going to use a Creative Grids 3.5 by 6.5 inch ruler. I need to trim this down to 3 by 3. So I'm going to use the side that has the whole numbers, not the half numbers. This side has half numbers. You see this? This is going to get confusing trying to figure out where exactly 3 by 3 is. If you use this side of it, now I know where 3 by 3 is because it's a solid black line. Okay? I'm not searching for it. I also have a white line running at a 45-degree angle right out of this corner. I'm going to lay that right along that seam line, just like that. Look at that, it's perfect. Okay, so you can see how I'm going to square this up. 3 inches, 3 inches, and I have a little bit of excess all the way around. That's the best way to square something up. Take a little bit off of all 4 sides, not just 2 sides. All right, so let's do that. Again, spinning mat is the way to go. So we'll do 1, spin, 1, whoop, and now spin. Now we're going to turn our ruler around and line it back up. So the 2 sides that I need to trim are on the top and on the side, but the ones I already trimmed are already here. Let's line those up now with the ruler perfectly. 3 inches, 3 inches, and there's my 45. Here we go. Trim, spin your mat, and trim again. Perfect. That's how you're going to create your half square triangles if you do not have star singles. All right? Okay, let's move on. My favorite thing, flying geese. Flying geese are amazing. We use a method called fast flying geese. Fast flying geese, they're fast. You're gonna make 4 at a time. I love that. So you're gonna cut a large square and we're gonna cut some smaller squares. All your measurements are in your pattern. The other place they are, the other tool we're gonna use today is the Ultimate Flying Geese tool. I absolutely love this ruler. Jen and I were talking the other night. We think this is actually our favorite ruler to use, hands down. We love this tool. Fast Flying Geese. So over here, if you ever misplace your directions for this ruler, have no fear, the directions are written on the ruler. Who does that, right? Well, Creative Grids thought of everything here. So our finished size on ours is 2.5 by 5. So we are going to follow letter E, and I'm cutting 1 6 3/4 inch square. That's my big square right here. 1, I'm cutting 4 3 3/4 inch squares, and that's what these are right here. Okay, let me show you how this works. So we take our smaller squares. I'm going to turn them over on the back, and again, I need to draw a line corner to corner to sew 1/4 inch away from this line. You know how that's not my favorite thing to do. So I'm going to use this Creative Grids seam guide, and I'm going to position this so my points are right in the middle of the groove. I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to spin my mat and draw a line on the other side. Ha, that looks great. I'm going to do it again, just because I know I'm going to need a couple more. I'm going to do this on all of these squares. Spin and draw the line on the other side, just like that. Okay? Next thing I'm going to do, is I'm going to take this and I'm going to lay this perfectly on here in a corner. I'm going to take this one and I'm going to lay it in the opposite corner. You see how these overlap? Perfect. We're going to take our patchwork pins. Now when I pin this, I pin well away from my sewing lanes. I don't want to come across a pin and sew it, and I definitely don't want to pick up the head of a pin with my presser foot as I'm sewing past it. Yeah, I've done that before. The machine does not like sewing with a pin caught underneath the presser foot. I've done that before. All right, let's not do that. There we go. Pins are well out of the way. Now the other thing that you can do is you can take these and you can trim this overlap right here if you like. Let me show you what that looks like. And then sew on these lines. So I did that ahead of time. So you can see how I trimmed that out of here. I sewed down and back just like that. Okay? Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this apart straight down the middle. Two funny looking pieces. Let's press these out. So I'm just going to heat that up. And I'm pressing, just flopping this over, pressing right toward the cream, not a problem. All right. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I need another square for this corner. So let's borrow the one that we pinned over here. Let's set him on here. Oh, I like that. Okay, let's pin this on. 1 and 2. I'm going to do this other one at the same time so I can take them both to the sewing machine. And I'm going to sew on the line. All right, I'll see you over there. All right, so now, of course, you guessed, we are going to cut these apart. Get my pins out of there. I'm going to cut this apart again, corner to corner, just like that. Now you can see how quick that is to make 4 flying geese. So let's press these out, just like before. All right, so I have 4 flying geese. They're oversized. Again, I love that. All right, so let's take a look. We are going to trim these up. Finished size is 2.5 by 5. So our unfinished size is 3 by 5.5. All right, add your 1/2 inch in there. So I'm going to use the trim lines I'm going to use is E. So I look up here in the top and trim 1, and I go all the way across to E, and I find my line, and it is a solid black line. I'm going to lay this on my flying geese, just like this. Trim 1 is up in the corner here, and E is right here, and here's my line. See how that lines up perfectly with my cream? You can see this dotted line right here is telling me where my 1/4 inch is above my point. I love that. All right, here we go. We're going to trim, spinning mat again, and trim. Now, let's trim, spin one more time. Now, I'm going to drop my ruler to trim 2. Let me There it is, trim 2 right here. Again, I'm going to use E. You can see E right here, and you can see how those triangles are perfect. Now I'm just going to line up the triangles. Look how beautiful that is. It's perfect. A perfect footprint right there. Again, it's confirmation I'm cutting the right one. 2.5 by 5, which is my finished size, not my unfinished size. This would be 3 by 5.5. All right, here we go. We're going to trim and trim. That is a perfect flying geese. You can't get any more perfect than that. You can do the sew and flip method. It's not going to be perfect. Your squares are never perfect when you do sew and flip. They never come out perfect like this. I love this method. All right, now let's say you don't have a ultimate flying geese tool. Put it on your birthday list or your Christmas list because you definitely want this tool. You will use it forever and again and again and again. However, if you don't have one, let's look at how to do that. All right, let's take a look at this ruler. Do you see how these black lines intersect here? They start in this bottom corner and they come up and they make this little V right here. Well, that V is going to go right here in that point. You see that? And I know that if I trim that right there, I have a perfect 1/4 inch above this point. That's what I want. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim that. I'm cutting that. Okay? So that is a perfect point. Now I need to trim this to 3 by 5.5. All right? So I'm going to use this side of the ruler, the even numbers, right? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 3 inches. Just like this. So now I've turned this ruler completely over, right? Here's the point that we used before. We used it up here in this corner. Now I'm just using this 3-inch line here to trim the back side of my flying geese. Okay. Now I need to trim this to 5.5 inches in length. All right, let's look at how to do that. I can see 5.5. We're starting at the 1/2 inch line and going all the way up to 5.5. Let's look at that. Now I'm going to tell you what I'm doing. I am looking at where this intersection is right here. This intersection right here, because I want this to be a perfect point. If you look at the flying geese that I just trimmed up, do you see how this comes to a perfect point? That's what I want on this corner. So I'm going to maneuver this ruler back and forth until I can confirm 5.5 is right here. I'm going to hit this point right here and this point right here. Let's do that. Let's cut. Turn my flying geese over. Now I'm going to line up my 5.5 inch mark right here. Oh, look at that. Perfect. Right here. Now I have a perfect point on that. See that? There we go. That's how you're going to trim it up if you have a regular ruler. Yes, you can do that. And yes, you can do it without the Ultimate Flying Geese tool. The Ultimate Flying Geese tool makes it a lot easier, right? Way fewer steps, way fewer maneuvering of the ruler. You just set it on there, cut, cut, spin, move it, cut, and you're done. This one you saw, I had to maneuver the ruler 4 times. I had to maneuver it to cut, all right? But you can do it, all right? There we go. That's how we make perfect flying geese. That's all there is to making up this block, all right? So this block, you have your flying geese that are here. You have half square triangles here and your pinwheel in the center. That's all the elements to this piece right here. All right? So I'm going to talk to you now about fussy cutting and the bouquet block. So we have a large piece of fabric here. like this. This is the bouquet fabric. You can see I've already taken one out of there, and that's for the block that I showed you, this one right here. That's for this one. So I did already cut one out of here. So you can see how packed the bouquets are on this. So what I did was I just took my Creative Grids 10.5-inch ruler. Now on this ruler, I want you to note the white lines here. This is showing you the center of the ruler. Right here in the center is a little circle. That is your little bullseye, but that is dead center. All right, I'm cutting a 10.5-inch square. I'm using a 10.5-inch ruler. So I am simply going to slide my ruler up and down and back and forth until I get it exactly where I want it. I found that 1 3/4 inches, half, 1 1/2, 1 3/4 was about dead on to do this. 1 3/4, 1 3/4. That's so close. I want the stems, I want them facing up, right? The bottom of the bouquet needs to be here. So you can turn. See how you can turn this ruler all around? And if you want your bouquets to look differently and turned, you go right ahead. That might actually look really cool. When I did this quilt, I just kept them all straight on. But you can do it your way if you like. I love that. I love that we all have our own personalities and we just make our own way here. 1 3/4. As long as we all have good tools and good piecing, they're all beautiful. All right, here we go. I'm happy with where this ruler is. It's 1 3/4 inches from all 4 sides to the points that I'm looking at on this bouquet. I'm not looking at this one or this one. I don't care about those because they're not going to be the focal point of the block. Okay, so I'm going to take a rotary cutter and I am using the spinning mat again. You guessed it, my favorite spinning mat. Now I'm going to kind of fold this fabric up a little bit. So I already know it's going to happen when I spin this. So I'm pushing down pretty hard on this ruler because I'm dragging all my fabric with me. And I don't want my ruler to move. Now that I have it set where I want it, yep, it stayed right there. So I'm going to make a second cut, grab my fabric, and spin again. Let's do it one more time. And the last time. There we go. Everybody still looks good. Let's cut. Okay. Set that aside. Excellent. There's our block. All right, there's my bouquet. So now let's talk about putting snowball corners on. Snowball corners are easy. They're just a simple sew and flip. So I have 2 different ways to do this. The first way, you guessed it, is a friction pen and draw the line on the back. Just like normal, sew and flip. We've all done this 100 times. You're going to put it on here. I would probably use a pin on this just because sometimes these corners do not want to stay there, especially if you're trying to pin all 4 of them on, and then you can just spin around your blocks and do them all at the same time and just chain piece them. That's definitely the easiest way to do this. But you're going to want to pin it because you're going to be moving these blocks around a lot. All right, then you'd sew corner to corner. Let me show you another way. If you don't want to draw the line, I have a tool called a folded corner clipper. Let's lay this on here. A folded corner clipper is a Creative Grids tool. So what you're going to do is you put your corner on there right where you want it. That's where I want this square. Now I know that this is a 3-inch square because I cut it. So I'm going to line up my 3-inch mark along the bottom. And you see this little hash mark on the end lines up perfectly with this end. This is lined up. This is lined up with the top. So I have confirmation I have this ruler on here right. Top is even. This is even. Dead on the line. And this is dead on this hash mark. I'm good to cut. Now I'm going to cut this. Just like that. I'm going to put a pin in this right here because I don't want these edges walking away from each other. Okay? All right, let's go sew this. I'm going to sew this one, and then I'm going to sew this one. Here we go. All right, so I sewed both of these. So now the one that we just drew the line on, that one I'm going to need to go back and trim. Let's go ahead and do that. All right, so that's 2 ways to do snowball corners. I have one more to show you. So let's say we don't want to draw the line. Let's say we're really not too comfortable with cutting it right away either. I get that. I get that. I really do. I'm going to put a pin in this. I'm going to take this to the machine, and I'm going to use something called diagonal seam tape. This is by Cluck Cluck Sew. This stuff is amazing. We have this installed on the machine, and I'll talk to you about it when I get right over there. Let's go take a look. This diagonal seam tape has a red line down the center, and this lines up with where the needle is. It has a 1/4 inch mark on either side of it. So if I want to sew on the diagonal and I want to sew directly from one point to another, I'm simply going to put my needle down just like that. You see this point right here? Let's take 1 stitch onto this, just like that. Now I'm going to line up this point. I'm rotating the block until this point is right here on this red line. Now I'm just going to follow that red line all the way up as I sew. Just like this. So it's kind of like driving. I'm not watching the needle, I'm watching the point that I'm sewing towards when I'm doing that. There we go. All right, so this one I'm going to have to trim as well. There we go. All right, snowball corners, 3 ways, you pick your favorite. All right. Pressing them out, I'm simply going to set my seam and press right out, just like that. Seam and press. When I'm doing this, I'm watching to make sure that these points match. These edges match. These edges match. If they don't match, I've done something wrong. Because you still want this block to be 10.5 inches when you're finished with it. You start with a 10.5 inch square, it should be 10.5 inches when you're done. All you're doing is replacing the 4 corners on the sides, just like that. So that is how to do snowball corners 3 different ways. That's all there is to these blocks. You have this one, and you're simply going to put them together just like that. Now, if you have a problem with 1/4 inch seam allowance, I get that. A lot of quilters do struggle with that. Accurate 1/4 inch is going to ensure your points are matching, your seams are coming out, your blocks are 10.5 inches like they're supposed to be. We have a solution for you. We have a seam guide setter. This will help you get a perfect scant 1/4 inch on your machine. It comes with 6 of these little guideline seam guides. If you need more of these, you just have to buy a refill pack. That's really nice. These stick to your machine. So you can stick, unstick when you're not using them and just set this on your machine, but you can use them again and again. You only have to buy the seam guide setter once because this plastic thing, stick it in a drawer next to your machine so you always have it. You don't lose it. Very easy. All right. Fresh blade in your rotary cutter. Always a good idea, especially when you're fussy cutting like this, because I don't want anything to skip. When I pick up that fabric off of there, I want that block to be completely cut out. I'm using a Schmetz Microtech sharp needles. Sharp needles are essential for getting sharp points. I have Clover Wonder Clips. I love Clover Wonder Clips. We're using those when we're doing the binding on this quilt. They are wonderful. Of course, I have a Clover seam ripper on set with me today. I did not use it, but you never know. I keep it handy all the time. You never know when you're going to need it. I talked about my scissors, a friction pen, and the different rulers I've got. That's what I have for you today. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and picked up some good tips on how to do accurate piecing. The quilt behind me, not as hard as it looks when you start breaking it down. I hope you enjoy it for many years to come. I will see you next time on a Shabby Fabrics tutorial.